Okay. Okay, great. It is now 1:04 on the East Coast. Thanks everyone for joining today. I really appreciate it. Today we are without the legendary Andrew Morgan. He is actually at Big Big today, otherwise occupied. So we're gonna have to make do without Adam today, or excuse me, without Andrew today. But we will soldier on and have a great session. So again, thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. We actually have a lot in terms of Fortify. We want to get feedback today. We've got some polls that we're going to put out. Unless are they okay now, Michelle?
Yes, I can launch them now.
Okay, so we're just going to keep Amy away from the polls. That's what it sounds like.
Exactly.
Okay. So yeah, so let's start with some numbers. I'm going to share my screen really quick. One of the things, we like to be as transparent as we can here at SaaS Alerts, and we wanted to provide you with. Can everyone see this?
Yep, we got it now, Jim.
Okay, cool. So we've now been GA, general access on SaaS Alerts for 8 days now, something like that, and we've got a lot of really great participation within the functionality. A lot of people are now using it. We now have 122 partners connected to it, and they've rolled it out to 625 of their end customers. The average secure score right now is coming in at 44.5. The worst score that we've seen so far is a 16. So hopefully you've applied some serious recommendations to that score so you can get it up. And then the highest score that we've seen so far is, what's that, 90?
94.
90, let's see. So actually, I'm going to have Liron, because I just bumped out of that. I'm going to have Liron come on and actually talk about some of the actions. So Liron, if you want to share that same image that I was sharing and just walk people through some of the highest performing recommended actions that we've seen, that would be great.
Sure. So some of the highest performing recommended actions that we have, looking at that list that Jim looked at, the number one is the automatic forwarding to external domains shall be disabled, which is the CISA recommendation based on the Microsoft breach that occurred a month or two ago. And from where I'm sitting, to me, that's kind of a no-brainer. I don't know why one of your customers would ever need to forward anything to an external domain. Oh, I need to forward my work email to my Gmail. I don't think you do. So that is a policy that we've seen, right? It's number one on the list. And it also kind of speaks to the fact that last I counted, we have 46 recommended actions that you can use in the system. And right, we're looking to you guys, to the community, to tell us where we should go next. We've heard a lot of partners ask us about CIS, and Chip actually informed us last week that the Microsoft recommended actions are based on CIS, and Microsoft worked with CIS to come up with a lot of these recommended actions. And we're taking some initiatives on our side to kind of help clarify this. But the way that this all ties together to our recommended actions is, if we discover that there's a policy that doesn't exist and it's something that we can do, like the disabling automatic forwarding to external domains, it's going to be one that we will implement and announce and make available to you guys. So that's right. So that's number one. Number two, which is another very obvious and easy one, I think, is to restrict anonymous users from joining Teams meetings. And then number 3 is only invited users should be automatically admitted to Teams meetings. So these are kind of simple, very straightforward policies that make a lot of sense. And these 3 policies currently make up our top 3 most implemented policies.
Okay, great. So I'm going to give way to actually Michelle, who can now put up some polls to get some idea of this group and how we're doing with Fortify.
All right, so we have a poll. We just want to kind of gauge who is using Fortify, and if you're not, just let us know why. We have lots of questions. No, very minimal questions.
So while people are clicking on poll buttons, Andy, the ever verbose Andy with questions dropped in a question in chat about NIST, CSF, and mapping. So what we've realized in talking to a lot of partners who keep bringing up mappings, we've had a mapping guide for SaaS alerts proper, not just Fortify, but for the manage application and all 266 events that we cover, where we map those to both NIST and the CIS group that pertain to the event that we're monitoring for. And we've sent that out to partners on request, but it's becoming more and more clear to us that what this keeps coming up as a consistent theme. And we are organizing our thoughts now around actually providing a couple of different reports in the report section so that you can send to your customer and say, all right, these are the SaaS alerts events that are being monitored for. Here's the exact NIST control. Here's the CIS group control. And here's the description of what's happening. We're going to give you that report so that you can send it to your customers, because it's beginning to feel to me like that's what we keep talking about. It's not that we don't do it. It's that you don't have access to it in a customer report. And the second piece is, obviously with the introduction of Fortify, now we're talking about policy management. Policy management falls into the same space. How is this policy mapped to NIST or CIS? And again, that information is publicly available, but it feels like you guys are asking us as a community, please just do the work for us and put it into a document, a report that we can send. And in this case, it would be really a custom report on a client by client basis, because everyone's policy enforcement is going to be different. So it would spit out that report of which policies have been implemented using Fortify and how those policies flow through to NIST and CIS. So I'll pause there. Andy, maybe you want to go first and see if that answer, look at the hands already up, answers your question, and we can discuss it more.
I'm honestly thinking, because I just sat through a Pete Peterson sales presentation, begin with the end in mind. Ultimately, we want to have our customers adopt all of these policies, and sometimes they're resistant. And it would be awesome, in addition to the reporting you just talked about, to be able to say, this is what the average breach cost would be for these non-compliant behaviors or these non-compliant settings, and to begin to talk and bring these back to real dollars. Because ultimately the question was, if you're really comfortable with how your current security is set up and your best friend just had a security breach, would you send your current IT provider over to help him? Or would you be looking for someone that's telling you something else, showing you where the gaps are, and having that dollars there?
So Andy, that's obviously really hard to quantify, what a security breach looks like on an average for different business sizes. Having said that, that's not something that we would build into the product as, okay, this is what it's going to cost you. We do have a blog article that is coming out shortly. I could see Amy smirking back there as soon as you said cost, because she knows what's coming. We're going to be doing a lot more content creation that you guys can use. There is a blog article coming out that specifically looks at that value. Like, there is an average number, but that average number isn't necessarily relevant to the MSP size customer.
So Charles, what I'm suggesting different though, is a story that talks about you choose not to be compliant, but the breaches occur because of non-compliance. And the average breach is this, or if for a cloud, it's moving into the cloud space much more aggressively. And here's the percentage of how this works. If you ever go to Vegas and you shoot craps, you kind of know if you're going to play the game, it's going to strike you once in a while.
Well, I don't play craps, so
Fair
stay
enough.
away from that one. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. But we have to be careful about trying to quantify that on a customer basis. That's I'd be comfortable doing.
I'm not suggesting what the cost to the customer would be, but what it has cost in the past for previous breaches that were related to cloud lapses in security and compliance.
Yep.
That's what I'm looking to get to.
Yep, that information is forthcoming in some thought leadership stuff that we've got coming out.
Good, thank you.
You'll see that pretty soon.
Okay, great. So Michelle, by now, hopefully everyone's taken the poll.
Well, not everyone, but 55%, which is actually pretty good.
Okay.
So share the results. Can you guys see those?
Not yet.
Okay.
There we
Yeah.
go.
Okay. So just over
Okay.
for using Fortify.
Okay. And we don't have any. Can we see the answers, the short answers on why? Or can you read them out? I guess
I can read them. Yeah, it says still learning the basics of the platform. Our president hasn't had the time to implement it. Would like to understand it better. Got a lot. Rollback changes, working with sales to convey this expectation. I'm 100% GWS, so waiting for that if it's coming, and CIS alignment if it's coming.
Okay.
Haven't had time. Haven't decided if we need it. About to work on rolling out. Need to better understand what it does before making big changes so we do not affect customers. Availability. Plan to dive in the next few months, Q4. No capacity to get it set up yet and not set it up yet. We'll do later today.
nice.
And those are the answers. So
Okay. I was actually thank you, Michelle. I was actually expecting this group to be a little higher on the adoption of Fortify, because this is, all of our all-stars on this.
Well, they are overall, Jim. Like at 56 yes and 44 no. If you look at the big numbers, it's system wide. It's about 5% of organizations are not of MSPs necessarily, but of tenant organizations have been connected to Fortify. So there's a long way to go, and this seems pretty active.
That is true. I was expecting like 70% adoption from this. I guess my expectations are very high. So with all that being said, like Chip, there are some answers in there in terms of I know you've already spoken to mapping to CIS and other things, but do you want to tackle anything specific in there?
Well, why don't we tackle again, since there were a number of answers in there that we're still learning about either the platform or Fortify. Why don't we just go through what Fortify is all about again? And Liron, maybe if you want to share your screen and drive, I'll navigate and narrate, and we can just sort of take people through the overall goals. And at the same time, this won't be a waste of time for those of you who have a pretty good sense of things, because what else I want to do is share with this group some of what we've been learning from the partners who are using Fortify in terms of how we need to improve it, what items are causing confusion. As always happens when we launch a new module, right now, our support requests are dominated by questions about Fortify and people looking for additional explanations of how it works. So we can cover some of that here and also get some feedback from you guys, as we always do on this call. So for those who are new to what Fortify is all about, or maybe even relatively new to SaaS alerts, Fortify is the latest module that we've released that steps us into security orchestration. So now we're looking not only at collecting event data and providing alerts, which was our original mission, responding to those alerts, which is sort of the SOAR mission, right? Orchestration and response. But we're also managing policies to improve the secure score. Right now for Microsoft tenants, I know exactly what it was. It says I'm 100% Google Workspace. Yes, we will be pushing this toward Google Workspace in the future as well. But you all know probably that Microsoft has a notion of a secure score. They evaluate the available possible security settings that can be established for any individual tenant, and they rate that and come up with a score. The highest score that we've seen that's achievable, I think, so far is about a 97%, 97 point something. I don't remember what it was. If you're a business basic or a business standard user, the best you're ever going to get is into the mid 50s. You need some advanced licensing and additional features to move beyond that. And what we're doing with SaaS alerts is we're making it very easy for the partner to quickly assess what the security scores are across the entire breadth of all of their organizations. That would be the average that you're looking at in this dashboard. To compare to benchmark, and we're still gathering data for benchmarks, but the benchmarks will be comparing you as an MSP and all of your customers to the rest of the MSPs who are using SaaS alerts and their customers, and giving you a benchmark in terms of how you compare and your organizations compare with what's becoming the standard. You can see in this table that each individual customer has their own secure score represented in that second column. And then, other data about the state of their connection and so forth. So Liran, maybe you want to jump over to actions so we can describe. So we launched Fortify, as Jim said, 8 days ago. At the time that we launched Fortify, I believe we had 26 distinct actions that we were taking. We also packaged the actions into, you can think them, I don't want to say a group policy, because that would confuse what Active Directory is, but a collection of policies that can be applied with a single click. And that policy collection is sometimes informed by a recommendation from CISA, will in future be informed by a recommendation from this team that says, hey guys, we'd really like to be able to take these 5 different policy recommendations, name them, package them into a bundle, and apply them to our customers moving forward. So we love taking feedback from the partner community for things like that. We've done a lot of that with Respond, created rule templates in Respond, and we're going to do something very similar in Fortify. We've tried to include extensive tooltips on every single one of these. You'll see when Liran mouses over, it's going to tell the partner, okay, when you apply this particular recommendation, it's going to make changes to the following different policies. So this is really common that when you look individually at these policies within the Microsoft Security Dashboard, Microsoft would have you making these changes one at a time, spending maybe an hour per tenant to make these changes. And we've packaged them together so it's a single click for your tenant, and off you go. A confusion that we've seen coming up from some partners who are using Fortify is the sort of the mental logic around which this is organized. We've had a number of partners who've been thinking of Fortify as, hey, it's going to show me a policy, and then I'm going to select any tenants that I want to apply it to. It actually works in reverse. So we're examining each tenant individually, and we're looking at the policies that are available to be applied for that tenant. And then we are showing in this particular table which actions are available for which tenant. So it would be perfectly possible in a real world situation. I'm thinking of a partner already that has 60 different organizations connected to Fortify, and they were confused because they were seeing the available actions coming up multiple times. It didn't really register for them in the way we've explained it so far, and we've been able to demonstrate it, that the organizations column is very important. You may see the same action 3 times in a row, but if you go over to look at the organizations column, it's a different organization for which that action is being recommended. So it's important to keep in mind that, like everything else we do, Fortify is very, very directed toward, let's examine what's going on with this customer organization, and how we can improve this specific customer organization. The menu items that fall underneath each row, you'll see a history, you'll see the ability to apply, and you'll see the ability to dismiss. So let's just look at these one by one. If we look at history, when Liran selects that, it's going to bring up a modal window that's going to tell us the action history. In this case, the one that he selected, this hasn't been chosen to be enforced yet, So the only action history here is that the initial recommendation has been observed by SaaS alerts and has been provided for the partner to take action if they choose. The action item is the pencil that's in the middle. Leon, if you want to click on that, this is where you would actually enforce a policy. It's really pretty straightforward. You can select multiple of these at once, and then it will bundle this apply actions into a nested group that you can apply all at one time. And Leon's going to sample that for us. So now we can apply all of these at one shot. And this might be, depending upon the presentation, this could be the same policy for 5 different customers. It could be 5 different policies for the same customer. It could be 25 different policies that are spread across multiple customers that some have 1 or 2 and some have 3 or 4. So it's pretty flexible in the way it can work. And then the last action here is to dismiss a recommendation. This is important because oftentimes partners are using alternative tools to mitigate a recommendation. For instance, multi-factor authentication. They may be using Duo instead of Microsoft, which, by the way, Microsoft does not like that, and they no longer recognize Duo or Okta as legitimate products from an MFA standpoint to satisfy the security requirement. We could debate all day long why they've taken that position, but that's their position. But nevertheless, you could type a note in here and says, okay, we're dismissing MFA because we use Duo. All right, well, that's what you do. You can also just accept the risk. There's an orange button down at the bottom, which, again, you can write a note, and the risk accepted reason may be, we're accepting this risk and we're not going to apply the policy because our customer refuses to apply the policy. That's a legitimate reason to say no. Andy, I see you've got your hand up.
Specifically to this dismiss reason, could you please add a date and time stamp to that dismiss reason so that we could say that this was what was done on a certain day and time?
It is already there, Andy. It will probably be hard for Leron to find one in history that shows that, but it's there with the date and time and also who did it. So, you know which tech took that action. Like everything else, we try and log all of the internal activity as well.
I'm also wanting to associate this to a document the customer signed. So I would want to put a URL in there or something to a place where I have the document. So that was,
yeah, it's free form, so you can drop anything you want in there.
Yep. Thank you.
So, Leron, let's have a look at the difference between ongoing and completed actions. This is another one that's really caused some confusion among partners in terms of how this works. So when you select an action and you complete that action, that recommendation in SaaS alerts, the very next thing that's going to happen is it's going to move it to this ongoing table. And we've noticed that the expectation for partners is that as soon as the command is successfully sent to Microsoft, they expect it to move from ongoing to completed. And that's actually not what happens. And it's by design that that's not what happens. We're going to change the UI a little bit to make this more accessible to everyone. But you'll notice underneath that bold term ongoing, there's an explanation here, which states that ongoing means that we've sent this set of commands, API commands to Microsoft to make these policy changes. And there has been no error returned from Microsoft saying that they can't be done. So that means the process is underway. Microsoft might make those updates to security policy fairly quickly, but it could take Microsoft up to 2 weeks to actually calculate or recalculate the security score and consider that these are completely impacted. That's one condition. There's a second condition, and we'll make this more clear. Let's say that one of the policies that you've applied is to require MFA for all users. And that's done through setting this policy here in SaaS alerts. All of the users will then begin getting messages that they have 14 days to go through an MFA setup and complete it. Even though that action has been completed in terms of what you, the MSP, are doing, you sent the instruction, the policy has been changed. Until every user in the environment actually sets up their multi-factor authentication process, that isn't going to move from ongoing to completed. So, so the bottom line is completed and Leron, we can bounce over to the language there. Completed are items that have been policy is applied, and all users in the tenant are now abiding by that policy. So we just want to make that distinction. And again, we're going to change the user interface around so that it becomes more clear about what these mean, because there's definitely been confusion. And I think we've all become accustomed to, hey, I make a change and I get an instant result. But that's not the way it works in the secure score world. And we're trying to provide an accurate representation for both you, the MSP, and obviously for your customer of what these impacts are having on the secure score and when. And Microsoft sometimes, they take their sweet time into updating the actual secure score elements itself. So I'll pause there. I see we've got some questions bouncing around and I'm not reading them live. Jim, maybe you can moderate through the questions.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm going to go back to, so how about basic Gmail, Yahoo, or Outlook? Can we score those accounts?
No. So SaaS Alerts only works with products that have APIs that are reachable for a tenant. So none of the free services described there have APIs that are provided for their customers. Like we can't go and access the Gmail API and start looking at Gmail accounts. Google Workspace, yes. Similarly, Yahoo, Outlook.com, the free version of Outlook that's out there that you get through live.com or a couple of other URLs that Microsoft uses, none of those apply. It's only paid business services that we can work with.
Okay, here's another one, Chip.
Hey, just one more thing to add to that is, last time I looked, Google does not have a concept of a secure score, right? Let's give Microsoft credit here for coming up with this concept. So if that is still true, then we would basically need to invent our own version of the Microsoft Secure Score for Google.
We will be inventing our own version for Google when we tackle Google Workspace.
Next question. Can we get those tool tips put into a KB article? This would make it easier to review.
Yes. So we do have a KB article underway. There's a corresponding request that came in a support ticket for that someone said, can you just give us a listing of all of the actions that are possible? So that KB article is being constructed and the tooltips will come with it. That's a pretty big task. So it's going to take us realistically probably 10 days to maybe 2 weeks to get that landed in a KB article. But we are underway with that.
Okay. Next question. It would be helpful if you would expose the data that Fortify has collected so we can better understand why an action showing has not already applied.
So generally speaking, that is shown. Well, it's shown if there's an error in the history. But we were actually discussing this morning among the development team because we've had other similar confusions about what's being presented in history. When actions are still and ongoing and incomplete, we're going to have a status section. In fact, some of the events or some of these recommendations already have a status section. Leroy, maybe you can find one. I don't know if you remember them right off the top of your head. I think that 5th or 6th down that has alternate mitigation. Look at the history on that one. That might have a status piece in it. But we're going to include a status that will say things like, okay, 15 of 64 users have configured MFA. And that's your explanation for why this thing is still ongoing. It's not complete. So we are going to enhance the information here to provide more detail for the partner so they understand why something is ongoing versus completed.
So here's an example of it. 52 out of 62 users are not registered with MFA.
Leron, we're not seeing what you're looking at. You must have only shared the tab, so it's not.
Oh, how about now?
Yep.
52 out of 62 users are not registered with MFA. So wherever possible, we do bubble this information forward. Today, during that meeting that Chip talked about, we identified kind of an outlier to this, and that is when we have our group policies that bundle a few of these together, we have to figure out how to show the implementation status for those to give you even to explain how this is going. So we are actively working on that. And actually, another piece that I would love this group's opinion about is, right, in this type of situation, like the one that we just looked at, you could make the argument that because let's say we initiated the action, so we've sent the command to Microsoft and we've told Microsoft, hey, we want MFA for everyone. And the current application behavior is that this is going to sit and ongoing until you have 62 out of 62 registered with MFA. But you might have a break glass account that is never going to have MFA on it by design, in which case you might be annoyed for that to just sit here and ongoing. So Chip, this is what we came up with, right, as a potential option. And I'd love the opinion of everyone here. And that is, does it make sense for you to mark something as completed? Because that break glass account will never have MFA on it. So I'm just going to go ahead and get it out of here. I have a
That's an open question for the floor.
Yeah.
I
So
would say-
essentially,
Being able to dismiss the 60-second account because it's a break glass account and log why you dismissed it is a perfect example of having a sub dismiss for a particular in progress action.
well, it's not really a dismissal. We don't want to reuse that term because there are,
Okay.
but what we will do is basically have a checkbox that allows a tech to select a checkbox, move to completed, and maybe force them to write a note as to why.
Exactly what I was trying to get at.
Yep, Eric.
Yeah, that's exactly when I put this in the chat, what I was thinking of. And also, it's great that it shows that number there, but if that was a clickable link that I could click on and then see who those 3 users were that weren't left yet, that would be really helpful. Because otherwise I have to go to 365 and figure out what that is and dig that out. Yeah, if that was a clickable link and could tell me exactly who those outliers were, that would be great.
Eric, would it be satisfactory to just bring them up in a modal window right here rather than have it be a clickable link to open
Sure.
another
Yeah,
tab?
some way to get that data. Yeah,
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah, and we have the data in the back end, so we know who those users are. It's actually a suggestion we talked about. You know, just so everyone knows, we're going to cover a lot of ground here. I wouldn't expect to see all these ideas implemented next week because there's a lot of things we are working on currently. But this is really, really good feedback, and we appreciate it.
So
Jim, any
in
other
that-
questions to call out there?
Yeah, so in that spirit, Chip, I would like to see, not me personally, I would like to see when the policy is being applied. It prompts for which groups / users it should target. The reason behind the suggestion is in my testing of the SaaS Fortify anti-phishing policy. It targeted every single identity, including my Avanan and Dropsuite journal accounts.
Yeah, it is going to when a domain wide or a tenant wide policy is what's recommended to be applied. That's the action that SaaS Alerts is going to take. It's going to apply at domain wide. So when you have an exception like an Avanan, I think this would fall under the action, if you will, or the ability to move things from an ongoing to a completed state and write a note as to why. So we would just need to provide you more information in that status about which users might be holding up the problem but you can assume right now that when you select a recommendation to be applied, it's going to be applied to every account in the tenant.
Okay. Chad's indicating that we don't need to invent anything. There are CIS benchmarks for GWS, Cloud Workspace, Google Workspace, excuse me. So you can, of course, modify your own for your own purposes.
Yeah, I agree, Chad, but we need to build that into a meaningful notion of a security score.
Let's see. see, people are giving kudos to Eric for some of his ideas. What happens if a change occurs on the Microsoft tenant directly? Does Fortify notify?
It does. So, Leron, if you go back maybe to the, so Leron, you're jumping to the next half of that. If we go back to actions, Leron, and we look for pre-existing.
You mean completed pre-existing?
Yeah. Yep. So everything that you see here that's labeled as pre-existing, when we read the tenant, when we scan the tenant to assess its current state from a policy perspective, anything that's already been implemented directly in the Microsoft 365 admin console will show up as pre-existing. Furthermore, what Leon was about to show us, if there's been a change, if there's been drift, for instance, let's go back to the MFA example. You formerly had everyone complying with MFA, and then for some reason or in some way, several users dropped out. That would show up as an regression. That would show up as a reduction in the secure score because the state of that policy had changed. Or if some other admin comes in and removes the policy altogether, you'll see that as a regression of the policy. You'll also see that as an alert in the standard managed part of the SaaS alert product.
So here's an excellent example. Enable conditional access policies to block legacy auth. 61 out of 62 users don't have legacy auth blocked.
Whoa.
That's got to be a pretty old tenant.
Yeah, but I think, a lot of folks are dealing with really old tenants.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Chad says that he'd be happy to help build or give feedback. He already has taken the CIS and generate custom risk scores for all subcontrols on a per client basis.
For GW, right?
For Google Workspace.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chad. We'll definitely take you up on that. So, Jim, how are we doing on time here?
We got 19 minutes left.
Okay. If we don't have any more questions on this kind of overview, what we'd like to do next is the number one request we've had even before we launched Fortify to GA was, can you guys give us templates? Can you give us the ability to create templates that we want to apply to different customers based upon their licensing type? So really speeding up the process even more. Well, Leron and I spent about 90 minutes this week, Leron doing 90% of the heavy lifting and the design and suggestions, and then the two of us tweaking. And we'd like to take you through a very initial cut at what we're thinking about from templates. This is all just wireframe mock-up. This is not going to be a demo. But again, this group always gives us good feedback. So with everybody's indulgence, we'd like to take you through that and let you know what the thinking looks like. Don't necessarily have to respond to it now. You guys can think about it. Shoot in comments later on. We're certainly happy to take questions and comments on it now. But with that said, Leron, let's share what we're thinking about with templates.
Thanks. And just to add to Chip's disclaimer, this is one step up from the paper napkin. So at very, very early stage. I showed this to the dev team this morning and kind of introduced this concept to them. So it has since undergone some changes. So I'll walk you guys through this. So first, we're going to add a new tab here to the top of the page with templates. And you'll notice these checkboxes are happening at the organization level. I'll talk about why this is scratched out a little bit. And we also have this new templates column, right? And then we have this templates filter. So now let's go to the templates tab. So in the templates tab, we're going to have a list of all of the unique recommended actions with the description or what appears in the tooltip for each one of those. And if we can, because some of these links are difficult to get to because they're like the SharePoint links, for instance, where the configuration happens in SharePoint, they're unique to the tenant. So I don't know if we can do this for all of them, but we'd like to, if possible, link you to the configuration so you could go in there and take a look at that. So this is a list, right, of all the recommended actions that we have. You can then filter for a particular template. So let's go ahead and do that. So if we filter for template 1, for instance, we can see that template 1 has these 3 recommended actions that are selected for it. If we want to add a new template, we come in here, we say add new, select, make our selection, give the template a name. Then if we want to update a template, so if you recall on this page, I have 3 boxes selected. Now I'm saying that I want to change template 1. So I'm going to uncheck the top checkbox, add this new checkbox. I'm going to click update template, get the nice toaster. Now I have the option to deploy my template changes. So if I wanted to deploy these template changes after I have initially done the update, I can click deploy template changes, or I can just save and close. But if I deploy the template changes, what we're going to get here is a summary of what changes are going to take place. You'll notice that this one is in red. The reason that it's in red is because this tenant that has this template isn't licensed to do this, so we can't do this, unfortunately. And then let's talk about the benchmarks that we've talked about. So we actually decided to go with 2 benchmark numbers. One is the average secure score, and the second one is a weighted average score. The reason that we want to use a weighted average is if you look at my example here, I have 2 organizations, Fake Org and Jesse's Girl. If Jesse's Girl has 1,000 accounts, but Fake Org has 100, that's obviously Jesse's Girl should have a different weight applied to it. So we're going to be providing both those scores. And then with each one of these gauges, there's going to be 3 numbers with the tooltip. So the first one is the average secure score for all your organizations connected to Fortify. The next one is the average for all partners. And then the third one is the average for the top 20%. So now let's take a look at how I actually apply the template. So I'm going to select my organization, and then I'm going to say add template. And you could obviously multi-select organizations here. So we'll get this modal, we'll have a table. The table will say the organizations that I've selected. Below that, we'll have another table that will show you the recommended actions. And then you could simply click apply template, and we will deploy these recommended actions to these organizations for you. If you want to make modifications to an existing organization, right, you can see that Jesse's Girl has template 2 applied to it. I can select Jesse's Girl. I can add another template on top of it, or I can remove an existing template if needed. So that's where we are with the template concept at this point. And I would love to get your thoughts, opinions.
My first comment is you guys have got to stop with the lyrics to Jesse's Girl in the chat, because now it literally is running through my head.
Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad I missed it. And we'll make sure to, when we create more organizations, we'll add more song titles into the organization.
I think the next guy that throws another section of lyrics in is going to have to sing it.
Oh, I love that. I was
Andy.
Jason.
What about enforcing templates? In other words, if someone goes in and does a regression, to have it reapply automatically.
That's it. That's getting to be an interesting one, Andy. Like, so let's say, I mean, I get the concept. Pretty difficult for us to implement, at least initially. You'd have to have some sort of a master override, right? Maybe you have, you know, the most senior admin in the MSP really does want to remove the template.
So I'm trying to say, in SaaS alerts, it's all the same. But if someone went into the template, and I'm just saying it, you know, someone who wanted to cause financial harm that worked for the company and modified it directly because they did this through the tenant, and I had it come up, I'd like if it's a template assigned, to have it auto reverse it and put it back the way it should be. That's where I was thinking about this.
Okay, that's definitely something that we can think about. So you're basically saying that even if someone makes a change from the Microsoft console directly, whatever we have stored in Sazzlers as to what that configuration should be, if we see that change, we're going to reapply it no matter what.
And that's part of my security offering, right?
Okay. Jim, any other ones in there you saw? Other than not song lyrics?
Let's see. Not really. Not questions. Not questions.
It looks like we nailed it. It's perfect. We can proceed to development. That's what I like to hear.
Sounds that way.
So this is V1.1 of Fortify, guys. So this is many weeks out, and we'll probably continue to change. But it sounds like we're on the we're getting over the target in terms of what this should look like, how it should function, and keep your suggestions coming. Like I said, this was the number one right out of the gate before we even launched. I think almost universally everyone was saying we want templates. So here we go.
Yeah. So this is your chance, by the way, to get something in. If you have a really good recommendation, this is your chance. Here's a question from Helen. For a fish policy fix, are you just using Microsoft's recommended defaults for the individual settings?
We're using Microsoft's recommended defaults, and that's one of those where you need additional licensing. You need Exchange Online Protection in order to apply that policy. Fortify will tell you that you need the additional licensing, but it is coming from Microsoft's recommended defaults. Good question, Helen.
She said, yep. It would be nice if you'd let us increase the individual settings.
So the reason that we went with these group policy settings, like you see here, is because of, and we need to update this tooltip, right? I just haven't had the chance to do that. There's 10, not 5, but there's actually 10 of these policies. And there's a very complicated interdependency between these various policies. So for example, if you enable 1, you also enable 2 and 3. But if you disable 3, you can maintain 2, but 1 is automatically disabled. So rather than deal with the headache of managing all those interdependencies, we just put them all into a single bundle and have chosen to handle it that way. We can certainly take a look at evaluating whether or not it makes sense to break them apart. But in order to implement something like this, and given the fact that these are some of our most popular policies, they've added a lot of points, right, to various organizations, but I certainly understand the need to want to apply these at an individual level. I just want to shed some light on why we've chosen to group them in this manner.
Yeah. And Helen, just to further the point, it's certainly something we can do is provide individual user management. But the goal here is the first goal, the initial goal, is to give the MSP a quick way of implementing the policies that are recommended, if, in this case, from Microsoft, to get the secure score as high as possible. Down the line, since we already obviously have the knowledge to manipulate this at a user by user level, we can certainly look at incorporating that. But that's going to be pretty far off in the future. Andy, I see you have your hand up, but Eric was up for a while first, so I want to see what he wanted to contribute.
Yeah, thanks. Leron answered my question. I was going to ask if you thought you would split those ones that are grouped together now out, and then we could put them in a template, but it sounds like no, that wouldn't make sense to do that based on what Leron just said.
Yeah, so and in case it's still not clear, the reason that we did it, and I'm going to specifically retract Leron's use of the phrase group policy. Leron is not an Active Directory expert, guys. So when he says group policy, what he means is a collection of policies that can be applied. And Leron will explain later on why it's significant. These these elements are codependent. That's why we put them together. So for instance, if you've got A, you cannot actually apply A unless you've applied C and D. Well, maybe it's the other way around. If you've got D, you can't get to D unless you've applied A. So that's why when we found these individual policy components that were that we can manipulate them one at a time, but you can't make them function unless there are prerequisites that have already been applied. That's why they're grouped. So Andy Rowe.
Thank you. One of the last things that comes up for me is a list of exception accounts, i.e. a break glass account, as being able to say these policies would apply to all but this, or if this one changed, I wouldn't want to be alerted on it, have that. I'm just thinking through that there'll be API user accounts potentially that could be problematic if some of these policies were implemented.
Yeah. I mean, again, Andy, I think the way we'll handle that initially is allow the MSP partner to move things from ongoing to completed with a checkbox and a note. That'll be the first way we tackle it. And just let them state that the exception is that, we're making this exception for a break glass account.
What I'm really trying to allude to is the template model with a list of break glass account types that it would not cause an exception on. So that's what I'm basically saying. As you look at templates and applying it across organizations, being able to define a list of accounts where we don't want it applied to always, that might be helpful.
So you're suggesting you construct a template and the MSP partner technician themselves puts in line by line, each individual break glass account that they have across all of their tenants. That would be an exception to that template.
Yeah, but I wouldn't do it at the template level. I would do it at the organization level. And I would say, these are the accepted accounts for policy templates.
Yeah, I'm not quite there in terms of understanding how we could implement that. But we can talk about it. So, you're almost what I hear you saying is you would want to be able to go into any organization, and Liron, maybe jump over to the organization screen for a second and pull up a user list. And you want to be able to flag in SaaS alerts. We would create a new data field that would identify that account as a break glass account. Like that would have uses way beyond Fortify, by the way.
Yeah, no, and or exempt to Fortify action. So, it might be that we want to know a break glass account's logging in from outside of the country, but
of course.
I don't want that to be the case where Fortify is applying, these attributes to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just keep in mind, right, that it's not always possible to add exceptions with every configuration.
But this was just what's coming up for me when I'm thinking about when these templates start getting applied globally across multiple tenants, do I cause more headaches for me if we have to deal with an emergency?
Okay. How about custom policies, or at least a setting in a policy?
So the way I interpret the question, Eric, is that's kind of a combination of Helen's request and what we're talking about here with templates, being able to break out the individual policies rather than group them together in collections, and then also apply them to individual users. I think that's where we get into custom policies. If you're talking about sort of the logical equivalent of a custom group policy object, I think that's a possibility, but maybe way, way far in the future for us in talking about Fortify. At this stage of the game, we're looking at the security policies that are specifically recommended by Microsoft and are available in the platform natively, and not necessarily looking at the creation of custom policies.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I was thinking more of the latter that you said there, or even I think in the anti-phishing policy, I think it's set to level 2, and I think that scale goes up to 4. Being able to adjust that scale and say, oh, if we want to set this for our clients at level 3 instead of level 2.
I think that's a really interesting idea.
Okay. We're basically at top of the hour. That being said, just want to remind people that you have the option at this point, if you're really enjoying Fortify, you can essentially keep your your existing price point as is with Fortify for the next 3 years if you want to lock in to your price point. So if you haven't talked to your account manager about that, you should definitely do that as soon as possible. The deadline is coming up. 9:30 is the deadline. And if you don't know your account manager, you can reach out to Ryan Riccardi, who's our VP of Partner Success, and he can point in the right direction. That would be Ryan at SaaSsource.com. So always your option. But with that, we're right at the top of the hour. Thanks all for participating. We'll have Andrew back next week to moderate, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.